There is a moment in the life of a nation, a single fragile point in time, where everything balances on a knife's edge, where the future that we know, the reality we take for granted, is merely one possibility among many. For the United States, that moment came in the humid summer of 1863 in a Pennsylvania town called Gettysburg. For 3 days, the armies of the North and South tore at each other, the air thick with lead and the screams of men. The fate of the Union hung in the balance, and it all culminated in one desperate, audacious gamble: Pickett's charge. 13,000 Confederate soldiers stepped out of the trees and into history, marching across an open field toward the entrenched Union center on Cemetery Ridge. We know how this story ends. The charge failed, the Union held, the Confederacy's last great offensive thrust was broken, and the slow, bloody march toward Appomattox began. But what if, on that day, the story changed? What if the artillery barrage had been more effective, silencing the Union guns? What if the coordination was just a little better, the resolve of the men just a fraction stronger? What if those 13,000 men didn't just reach the stone wall on Cemetery Ridge, but broke through it? Imagine the shockwave. The Army of the Potomac, shattered and routed. General Meade, forced into a desperate, humiliating retreat. Washington, D.C., now utterly exposed to Robert E. Lee's victorious and emboldened Army of Northern Virginia. In our timeline, Gettysburg was the beginning of the end for the Confederacy. But in this one, it becomes the catalyst for its salvation. With a stunning victory on Northern soil, the political will in the North cracks. The Copperheads and Peace Democrats gain immense power. Public support for the war, already weary, evaporates overnight. Facing a military catastrophe and a political revolt, President Lincoln is forced to the bargaining table. Under intense pressure from European powers who now recognize the Confederacy as a legitimate nation, a ceasefire is declared, not a surrender, but an armistice. And so, by the end of 1864, instead of a preserved Union celebrating its hard-won victory, there are two nations: the United States of America, humiliated and fractured, and alongside it, a new and fragile republic, the Confederate States of America, born not in a spirit of brotherhood, but cemented by the institution of slavery. This is not the end of the story. It is merely the end of the war and the beginning of a far darker and more divided world. What happens next? How does this new, fractured America reshape a continent and indeed the entire world? That is a story for another time. We left our story at the dawn of a new, fractured America. The Treaty of Alexandria has been signed. The great experiment of democracy, conceived in liberty, has now been broken in two. But the end of the war is not the beginning of peace. It is the start of a long, cold shadow falling across North America. The Confederate States of America now exists as a sovereign nation, but its foundation is not cotton or states' rights or independence. Its cornerstone is and remains human bondage. The peculiar institution does not wither away as some hopeful diplomats might have speculated. It is codified, modernized, and expanded. With international recognition, the CSA seeks economic partnerships, selling its prime cotton to British and French mills in exchange for industrial machinery. Not to build railroads for all, but to build a more efficient engine of oppression. The world, complicit in its creation, now becomes complicit in its perpetuation. Imagine the geopolitical landscape. Two antagonistic nations share a continent-long, indefensible border. It is not the peaceful border between the US and Canada. It is a tense, militarized frontier, scarred by a recent war and fraught with distrust. An American Berlin Wall runs along the Mason-Dixon line, not of concrete, but of fear and resentment. The United States, humiliated and financially drained, turns inward. Its promise of manifest destiny is shattered. The West becomes a contested territory, a bloody battleground for proxy conflicts between the two powers, each vying for the loyalty of new states. And what of the 20th century? When the lights go out in Europe in 1914, does a divided America rally to the cause of its old allies? Or does it stay fractured and neutral? Perhaps the Confederacy, with its deep economic ties to Britain, joins the Allies. Perhaps the United States, bitter and isolated, refuses to fight alongside its former enemy. And then, the 1940s, a world threatened by totalitarianism. Would a broken America have the unity, the strength, or even the will to become the arsenal of democracy? Or would a continent, still nursing the wounds from its own civil war 80 years prior, be too weak, too divided to confront the rising darkness in Europe and the Pacific? The existence of the Confederate States of America wouldn't just change American history. It would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the entire world, potentially dimming the light of freedom in its darkest hour. We study history not just to learn what was, but to understand the profound value of what is. The world we live in, with all its flaws, was carved from specific choices and fragile victories. The high ground at Gettysburg, the resolve of a nation, the long and painful road to reunion. These were not inevitabilities. They were victories hard won by those who came before us. This alternate path is a dark reminder of how easily the world we know can unravel. It is a testament to the weight of a single moment and a tribute to the future that was preserved through immense sacrifice. The past is unfolded. Remember it.